Hello, and welcome to another episode of Agency Brilliance. It is a pleasure to be with everyone here today. My name is Bill Reeks. I lead the Gramercy Institute. We are a think tank for senior marketers from major financial firms. That being said, you can probably imagine that agencies are a big part of our network and a big part of our expertise that we're able to offer up to this community of senior marketers from financial firms. And today is no exception. And today we're going to talk about media in financial services marketing. And we really have a stellar panel that I'll introduce you all to in just a moment, one by one. A stellar panel of media experts from various corners of the media business, but all of them agencies and all of them experts and all of them financial services experts. So it's really a pleasure to have everyone on board. Now, we have four panelists today, and I'll name them first, and then I'm going to go around and have each one of them introduce themselves. We have Adam Klareich from Ptarmigan Media. We have Len Costa from RooneyPartners. We have Andy Korn from E5A Integrated Marketing. And we have Andy Wagner from Blacklight MA. So that all said, let's go one by one, and I'll have each one of them tell us a little bit about themselves, their agency, and what they do. So Andy Wagner, how about I start with you, my friend? Please tell us a little bit more about Blacklight. Tell us about what you do or what you focus in there, and anything else you care to share.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. And good morning to everybody. My name is Andrew Wagner. I'm the founder CEO of Blacklight Media and Analytics. We focus on helping our clients operate their business in the black profitably at scale. We focus mostly on direct-to-consumer for the last 24 years, executions, and we live with really two questions for our clients. What does success equal, and how do you measure it? Then we help them drive their business by identifying that success event and then helping them build the measurement stick so that they can assure that every dollar that they spend X and they got Y. This is something that is critical from the top down, and I, as founder CEO, still live and own clients as the key point person to exercise my skill set of really being in the weeds on all the elements and components for execution.
Andy, that's a terrific introduction, and I thank you for joining us. What's the origin of the name Blacklight?
So we started the company in 2000 as traffic buyer. We bought traffic, and I think that the audience understood what traffic was. It was digital at the time, electronic publications, as they said. But over the years, we wanted to expand the storyline of really what we do from what is a media buyer that buys traffic, a digital buyer, to something, I guess, maybe a little bit more abstracted, which is helping companies execute their business and operate in the black. So Blacklight is an accounting principle of helping companies operate in the black, and we, as in a sense, a light, identify how to build that out. And there
Terrific.
you go.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad I asked. So, Andy, thank you so much for that. I'm going to scoot over to Adam Klareich, please, from Ptarmigan Media. Be careful, I might ask you what a Ptarmigan is. Would you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, about Ptarmigan Media, and what else you might wish to share?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Adam Klareich. I'm a group director at Ptarmigan Media. Yesterday was actually my 9-year anniversary at Ptarmigan Media, so I've been here for quite some time now. Ptarmigan Media, it's got a rich history. It was founded 30 plus years ago out of the UK. Here in New York, I think we're about 10, 11 years in, but we are essentially a financial services expert when it comes to media planning and buying and strategizing. Once again, that's kind of our bread and butter and what we've done for 30 plus years. So we have like a lot of rich knowledge about the space and these niche audiences in the financial services sector.
Wow, it's terrific to have you with us. I bet in the 9 years that you've been at Ptarmigan, financial media has changed quite a bit. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, from everything from like the media channels that like the media mix when it comes to planning, to to measurement, to newer partners, to newer opportunities, to trends that we've seen. There's been quite a shift in the landscape over the past 9 years.
Yeah. And Adam, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to our discussion. Let's move on to Andy Korn, if we may. Andy, chime in, if you will. You're from E5A. Tell us more about it. Tell us more about what you do and anything else you care to share.
Sure. So E5A originally was founded as an investment company, E5AIM for investment management. I was a portfolio manager and chief investment officer for about 12 years. And prior to that, I was in financial marketing and was a multi-factor model guy. And that multi-factor model math is brought into a lot of what we do in media. Optimization, particularly. Anyway, we are a full service agency. We like to have as much control over campaigns as possible because we generally are held to a very specific measurement. It might be number of customers acquired, amount of assets under management added, things like that, where we're really looking at getting to a very specific goal. The more specific it is, the happier my team is because we're very goal oriented. We're competitive people and we love to exceed client expectations. Part of that, about 18 months ago, when we were looking for another edge, we created a data department. And we now have about 10 million investors in our own proprietary database. Most of them are accredited. And we have them categorized by job function, like architects, doctors, dentists, lawyers, etc., and also by education. We've got MBAs, we've got people with PhDs, etc., and we tend to do a lot of work on the retail side aimed at that, but we work with institutional campaigns and advisor campaigns quite a bit as well. So we're always looking at what are we going to do next, and what can we do to create that advantage for our clients.
Andy, I've known you all these years, and I never knew that you started as an investment management firm. I'm also very impressed that you've picked up on the IM as investment management as well as integrated marketing, and that's impressive in and of itself because it stands for both. But it seems pretty clear now, almost like in hindsight, that your financial expertise could be one of your or is one of your key differentiators. And I'm asking, would that be accurate?
It is. I mean, I've designed 6 indices tracked by ETFs. 2 of them got to over $1 billion in AUM while I was still the index designer. That company was sold and also actively managed over $1 billion in equities. So it is very different having made multi-million-dollar trades and having worked with advisors selling product into that. So it is definitely a slightly different take.
Yeah. Andy, thanks so much. And I will say one of the value pillars of the group that you all belong to, which is our agency shortlist, our financial agency shortlist, is that, boy, expertise in financial services is critical from all that I understand, and that oftentimes clients, they might go with an agency without, or put it this way, they may go with an agency expecting big results, but it's the expertise in financial that really could make such a big difference.
Well, if I could just toss in, my next Zoom after this is actually a deal structuring Zoom, where it will be myself, the issuer of private securities, but publicly sold, and their lawyers to help structure the deal. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a banker, but I've seen thousands of them, and also I know what can be marketed.
Yeah.
So that's why we're in on that and have a seat at that table.
Andy,
So
great to have you. Oh, sorry.
thank you.
Great to have
be
you.
there.
Thank you for that introduction. Last and certainly not least, we have Len Costa from RooneyPartners. Len, tell us a little bit more about RooneyPartners, your approach to media, as well as anything about yourself that you wish to share.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks very much for inviting me to this. So RooneyPartners is a strategic storytelling agency. We were founded in 2003 by my two business partners, including our founding partner, Terry Rooney, thus the name RooneyPartners, perhaps less creative than some of the other naming strategies for my colleagues on the call. But as I mentioned originally, really focused pure play on, I think, probably what we all think of when we hear the term public relations. So really kind of highly bespoke story ideation targeted to the national financial media and business media. And over the years, as I joined the firm, we have built out more of a full service agency capability with particular expertise, I would say, in content development, content strategy, as well as digital marketing and communications, including really working our way down the funnel, if you will, alongside our clients so that we can really meet them at their point of need, whether it's building brand awareness and a reputation through the national media, or really working more on the types of campaigns that might be designed to drive consideration or bring in leads. So we have capabilities across that spectrum. I would also add that we work certainly in financial services, which is extremely important to us, but we also work outside of it, which has been great because it allows us to incubate ideas in other industries and sort of bring them into financial services and of course, vice versa as well. In terms of my own background, and maybe this is a little bit of a differentiating factor for us, I myself and many of my colleagues come out of the journalism world. So we have quite a crew of, shall we say, recovering journalists. So it's really that storytelling sense that animates our media relations programs that we've really tried to preserve and port over to the other parts of our operation.
Well, welcome aboard the Financial Agency Shortlist. Welcome to this conversation. Great to have you. And as I hope our audience can understand, it is really valuable for us to each give our own introduction so that we understand the points of view that this both unique and specified panel comes from. Now, let me say, thank you, Len, very much. Let me say this, for those in our audience, please feel free to use the Q&A, Sam? No, yeah. The Q&A toggle at the bottom. If you wish to ask a question, I will then read it to our panelists along the way at the right time. I also wish to tell everyone that this, along with the three others in this series, will be distributed several times to our full network in video recorded fashion as well, in case anyone wants to review this or share this with your team. That all said, now I have obviously prepared some questions for this group, so they've given some forethought to some of their responses. One of them, though, is a fun exercise, and I'm going to ask each one of you. I'm going to read the opening part of my question. What are some of the elements of successful financial media and content distribution strategy today? All right, so what are the elements of success of financial services, media, and content distribution today? I've asked each one to maybe come up with a few of them, but tell us one. Tell us one that seems to resonate with you, and we're going to keep a list, and we'll have something to share with you at the end of going through all of our panelists. Maybe Andy Korn, I'll start with you. What is one of those elements of success in media and content that you might want to point to first?
So I'm trying to answer it as one, but it might sound like two. So we like to, once we have picked our audience or audiences, figure out where they are, which I think is standard in media planning and buying and optimization. We like to surround them with having native ads in 3 newsletters, as a for instance. being on the web, being on social. And keep in mind, a lot of what we do has very little waste, because it might be we're going after doctors and dentists, as a for instance, because they like a specific product or service or investment. So we're going after them. So I'm going to get to the one thing, which is intellectual honesty. We constantly are turning all our knobs up and down based on the data. And I'm sure you're going to hear something similar from all of my friends here on the panel. And I am often surprised at what is working well and what is not working well, and then defining what's working well down to quality. So on the investment side, someone putting in $1 million has a lot more weight than someone putting in $1,000. So we need to be looking at that very carefully and being delighted by the surprise, and having that intellectual honesty, I would say, is that one thing.
Great point. And so I'm understanding this notion of intellectual honesty is not only being honest. So let's assume that there are many honest media outfits out there. But when you say intellectually, you mean having the brain power to really dig down and understand exactly what is the truth. Am I reading that correctly?
So the brain power is the easy part. It's having the attitude of going with the data and not trying to predetermine an outcome, or thinking, gee, we're going to do really well on financial news, and then we suck on financial news, but we're doing exceptionally well on Instagram. It's like, I can't predict that. I don't want to predict that. And I want to be able to go with what the data is dictating.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And getting the entire team on board with that on the client side and internally.
Removing the
bias. That's really what I mean.
Yeah. And going with the facts. And that's funny. That's that could also come under the category of discipline, right? Like I'm going to have the discipline to say, my personal expectations are not part of this. And that's tough.
And I had that as a portfolio manager when my industrials might outperform my technology stocks. It just happens. It doesn't sound logical, but it happens.
Yeah. Andy, great one. Thank you for that contribution to this running list that we're taking. Let's go with Len Costa. Len, what might you add to this list of excellence that we should be paying attention to in media and content?
Yeah, maybe what I'll do is go in a slightly different direction and talk a little bit more specifically about content distribution best practices. One area that we have been focused on of late for clients and are seeing real results is trying to take the broader digital marketing funnel that is often designed to culminate in sales or leads, and applying that strategically, and I would say largely through paid social, in a thought leadership and content context. So, you see a lot of content campaigns where you may be targeted, behaviorally or through interest targeting, say on LinkedIn, and, you're probably going to scroll past it. Yeah. Certainly if it's your first encounter. So one of the tactics that we've been applying, and it's been a real element of success, is taking that thought leadership asset and breaking it apart into different content formats, and then warming the audience up with lower cost formats like video, and then driving people to engage with shorter form components of that longer form asset, and then finally retargeting people for content downloads. So just that notion of the larger funnel applied more narrowly in the context of thought leadership distribution can really enhance results and performance we've seen. So I would flag that one.
That is I'm writing my note. That is a terrific contribution to what we're doing here. Yes, I understand that. And so my note here is follow the funnel, meaning warm up, and don't just start with the conversion, right?
Right.
Don't just
please download my 45-page PDF, even though we've never met. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Thank you. I'd like to be asked out for lunch before I further. Len, that's a terrific addition to this list. I appreciate that very much. How about you, Adam? Adam Klareich, sorry.
Sure. So I think that partly in order to deliver a successful campaign, you have to understand the competitive space as well and see what your competitors are doing, right? You know, oftentimes we'll be presented a media brief, right? And you want to do a million different things with a budget that doesn't provide the ability to do those types of things, right? Especially, you know, in the financial services, in the asset management space, we've seen a way more cluttered marketplace than before. You know, higher budgets, so it's hard to make an impact when it is a cluttered marketplace and budget could be limited. So if you have a good understanding of what your competitors are doing, it allows you to kind of find your lane and where can you make a difference to stand out.
That is a terrific a point you bring up. What are we talking about when we say understanding your competition? What they are doing, really meaning like taking your top 5 competitors and understanding where their budgets are likely at. Where's their? Go ahead. I'll let you.
No, that's correct. It's like, what are they doing with their media dollars? Are they focusing on, you know, business channel, high share of voice, sponsorships with this partner and this partner? Well, if so, then maybe that's not the best method for our client. Maybe what you want to do is go a route with video potentially, and run it on these particular partners that also have, you know, a strong reach among the target audience.
Yeah, that's a terrific addition to this. And I mean, like, look, we spend, or financial firms spend millions upon millions of dollars differentiating their message, right? Differentiating their strategy, their message. So what you're saying is that, yeah, that's all great, but we got to go with we have to differentiate in media as well.
You know, saying like there are some, you know, accounts that have millions and millions of dollars. Some have $1 million, or it could be a little bit less. So, you know, it's how do you find your unique path to achieve your goals given the parameters that you're working with.
Yeah. And I'm betting in your career you've tried some paths that might have been more experimental at the time, based on the notion that you're saying, like, look, I've heard this is happening. Might we wish to explore that? And I guess you kind of need a certain kind of client to go with you on stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, the other thing to add to that is, because we kind of focus on just the financial services landscape, we have a lot of data. We've seen, you know, just from history, like what works, what doesn't work. So we also kind of have that in our toolbox as well, where we can give you a good idea of, like, we think that this would likely work for you guys, if the trends that we've seen in the past would hold true.
Yeah. Adam, thanks so much for your contribution to this this list that we're compiling. Let's move on to Andy Wagner, if we may. And Andy, what would be one of the elements of success that stands out in your mind in your work?
It's measurability.
Mm-hmm.
That every dollar that's spent has to be measurable, and it has to be stack ranked so that we could understand, you know, where the investment should be made and where the investment should be scaled. Mm-hmm. One of the things that was said earlier was, you know, Len was talking about content syndication, distribution, and thinking about the funnel really from the top down, where we as a firm, we live in the bottom up. You know, we were born at the bottom of the funnel as a requirement, or what success equaled for our clients when we came out as an organization, and have been living that all the way through. You know, that said, the opportunity to move up the funnel has always been sort of an aspirational component of our company. But what happens is that we end up working with the team that is responsible to drive the business versus the team that's responsible to drive the brand. Again, that said, sometimes you look at, and the example that you gave earlier with LinkedIn was perfect, which is for us, a lot of times on a LinkedIn execution, we're going to be looking for an asset that is a provocative asset. Let's call it a Gartner or a Forrester study that they could download. And we would lead with that asset to be able to get a cost to acquire on a target. On a CPM basis in a LinkedIn environment. Not the opposite, not let's not call it the opposite, but not the strategy of, let's warm them up with video, move them into, an infographic, and then finally hit them with the join the webinar, for example. But a deep appreciation of that. And in fact, I haven't executed that experiment where I took one set of titles and went through that went through that sequence versus another, but that would be an exciting, the hypothesis being that we're going to get a better conversion on the bottom of the funnel if we warm them up with these assets in this order. So I'm excited to hear about those those kinds of experiments, and I'm also excited when I meet a client that has the patience and process orientation to allow us to do an experiment like that on their behalf, which is sometimes hard to find.
Well, I am delighted that you guys are both, and I'm talking about Len and Andy specifically, are both in the same room. You guys should talk to each other after this thing. But to follow up, Andy Wagner, on your point, which is fascinating to me, because I am sure there are examples where you, and I'll say it this way, that you hit the jackpot for your client, right? And I'm sure there are examples where you guys are really scratching your head, wondering why is this metric not happening for us? Like, what are we doing? And then you gotta solve for that variable. It's like living by the sword, dying by the sword. Do any, is that true? Is really my question to you. And are there any examples of those two dynamics that I just expressed?
Sure, absolutely. When you go to market with an experiment, if that you start reading the data on that experiment, collecting a sample. Some clients will go to an experiment and say they want to make an investment of a certain amount of money for the experiment, but it's not really about the dollar figure. It's really about collecting a sample so that you can understand, was this successful or not successful. So with a lot of experiments, they're going to go through stages. In stage one, if the experiment is significantly off the mark, then you could say, what, let's say it's 40% more expensive than you had expected it to be for that execution. The first thing you look to is instrumentation of the execution. Was there an error in the execution? Is the targeting what we bought what actually is? Was there some error in the execution that caused it to be different? So once you get rid of that, which most of the time you don't find, and then you look at what you've executed, you say, well, if my offer was stronger, could I have turned that 40% to a 30%? If I came into this in a sequence basis, can I have executed that? Can I have turned that 40% into 20%? But if it's too far off the mark, it's not going to work. But for a lot of things that are close to the mark, that's when you start thinking about how do you bring it into line. Sometimes we'll go with the easiest thing first, which is we'll negotiate our rate down with a partner. If we're doing a direct deal with a partner, we'll try to get a reduction, even if it's programmatic and you're doing a private marketplace deal. You look to get a unit price that's, hey, I'd love to continue this buy, but I need a 30% reduction. It's 40% off the mark. I need you guys to cut that. Let's split it 20. You cut it down by 20. I'll try a new offer. So there's the publisher side equation that comes into it. And then there's, the messaging, the sequencing, a host of different variables to bring it into line. But again, the client's not going to have a lot of patience if it's too far off the mark. And also, you don't want to make that investment in time and energy if the reach of the opportunity is not there. So the reach has to be there. It has to be worth the energy to try to make it work.
Yeah. Andy, thank you so much for that, as I say, contribution to our list. Panelists, is there any other glaring omission from the list we're putting together? Is something else that you were about to say, but you went with the point that you did go with that you might want to add to our list? Feel free to either chime in or raise your hand, whatever you want to do. But if not, these are 4 excellent points. Yeah, Andy Korn.
We have found since the pandemic that there is a bizarre seasonality to everything. And it's not necessarily summer, fall, winter, spring. It has to do with the mood of the country. It has to do sometimes with the stock market. It may have to do with when school is coming out or school's going back into session. And when you're looking at recency and then you're looking at 3 months, 6 months, which metric is going to be most relevant when? And that is something that we have found to be fascinating. We have found recency to be way more important than it was a couple of years ago. And I'm just wondering if anyone else is seeing anything similar.
Anyone else care to chime in on that? That's a great point.
I've got a thought on that. Yeah. Along the topic of like recency and relevancy, right? I'll give you like an anecdote. It's funny that you mentioned since the pandemic, you've seen that, but was working on an account where, it was March of 2020, COVID hit, and this particular asset manager changed their creative messaging very, very quickly, made it highly, highly relevant to what was going on. And we saw some of the best performance metrics that we've ever seen. And it was not a like unique looking creative. It was kind of plain looking, but just how relevant it was to what was going on, and how it aligned with the current events and everything. It was just it resonated with the audience incredibly well.
That's exactly our experience as well.
And again, just for myself and for our audience, so what you're talking about though basically is, well, in this case, Adam, it was more current event related. It was more, this is happening and let's sort of speak to that, whether it was, I don't know, well, something that everyone knew about, and therefore let's speak to that particular point. So yeah, that's really interesting. Terrific point. And I'll say Andy and Andy Korn and
I'm just going to add one more thing.
I'm asking you for that.
We have several clients who are queued up, everything's ready through compliance, and we're not launching until after the election.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone else is experiencing that. The election, no one wants to touch with a 30-foot pole, let alone a 10-foot pole. And I just think it's fascinating, some of the perceived risk management by clients and to the relevancy of it. So, just like last year, the holidays, Christmas to New Year's, was and the 3 weeks leading up was incredible in selling both private securities and public securities, banking, insurance, retirement. Everything was working.
Yeah.
The year before at Christmas, nothing was working. So, and easily turned down. And then Q5 happens, from December 26th to mid-January, and then boom, everything takes off again. So seeing these different milestones, I just think has been a real experience the last couple of years.
That's a great point. I'll ask, are others on this panel sensing the same kind of thing, a delay up until after the election? Len, Costa, and any?
Yeah, I can just jump in. I mean, I would say that we do have to keep a close eye on media costs, particularly in the paid social lane where we do a lot of paid media. And there's just a lot of strange things happening. Like, given what's happened on X, I think LinkedIn has been a beneficiary of ad dollars that might have otherwise gone there. And then with the election spending being way up, we see Meta costs rising. So that's probably the piece of this that we're most familiar with, and see is that the added pressure on media costs on certain channels, no doubt due to the election.
Yeah, yeah. And how about Adam? You sensing this dynamic as well?
There's a lot of conversations about what to do around the election, like making sure that we're on specific content. Should we not be around world news? If we're launching something, should we wait, a certain amount of time post-election to ensure that, we wouldn't be around any coverage? So there's a lot of talks around it. Yes.
Yeah. Fascinating. All right. Yeah, Andy, I think Andy Wagner, you have a point to make, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. From my chair, there's an interesting in the mortgage business right now. You're looking at the Fed meeting in February or on September 17th and 18th, making a decision about cutting rates. And this will be the first rate cut actually that's going to happen since March of 2020 was the last time rates went down. And then it's an election year. So, we're talking to a client about the idea that, the message could be, there's an opportunity to really build the brand in this hot moment and create that increase in brand consideration, knowing that the goods are going to get delivered on September 18th. And it's a very interesting time if you think about timing and how to take advantage of timing as it relates to, as Andy Korn was saying, the world, with COVID the year after, it really, everything came roaring back. And then, it's sort of coming back to a level set. But here I'm looking at in a sense, almost a guarantee of a rate cut, coupled with it being historic from a timing perspective. Of course, it's historic that my dog is barking in this moment. And he's a Havanese, by the way. So it's just such a wonderful opportunity. And again, making this position or taking this position with the client and explaining this opportunity, it all seems to fit nicely together. And sometimes it's so hard to find a really solid story where you can see what the strategy could be to elevate the brand. And because there's only so many moments a brand could overtake go from a challenger to a champion or move up the rankings. So it is an interesting time, and I find myself getting excited about this opportunity and trying to position it in different ways to explain it to the client for an opportunity, but doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Because even with that, the fact is there's concern that the market is going to drive incrementality if you do nothing. So you could do nothing and then you could overwhelm your infrastructure just handling the incrementality that's going to come through. So if you have a sales team or an LO team, they're going to be crushed with what's going to come through just generally. So if you try to lift it even farther, it's possible it could backfire on you. So I still find it a very interesting time. It's like, when do you get the historic change? And when are you in an election year that you could even position your language in a certain way? But I get excited as a marketer about when I see something that really looks like, instead of having to crawl through under rocks and find opportunities on a one-by-one basis and add small increments together to show value, these things open up. And I'm going to close.
All right. Listen, I love this activity. We have some questions that we're prepared for, but before I do, because I think we're all getting a lot out of this exercise, is there anything else that anyone would like to add into our list of elements of success in financial media and content today? Anything? Yeah, Len Costa.
Yeah, thank you. Just to throw out one other opportunity that we've sought to capitalize on with many clients. And it can be a real challenge because of the way marketing and communications are often split into distinct roles and functions and departments in large financial services organizations. But to Andy's point, the opportunity around brand, and given the description of my firm, this is not going to come as a surprise, but the idea would be, don't overlook the power of earned media in this mix. And the combination of earned media alongside owned and paid, it's not necessarily one or the other, but that combination that can really animate an impactful campaign. So even if it's back to my original comments about thought leadership, the opportunity to develop derivative content that could be packaged as an op-ed, landed in the press, then used to potentially create media opportunities in broadcast to talk about the op-ed, and then sequencing that with a really smart paid activation and social. I think the combination of those elements can be really powerful. And I see across our client base, in some cases, missed opportunities just due to the simple fact that sometimes these channels are owned by different departments, and synthesizing it all together into a really kind of cohesive activation plan can be a challenge. But when it does come together, that earned media piece, if you target the right media, can be very, very impactful.
Yeah. Terrific point, Len. Thank you so much. Before I move on, I'm going to review our little list. Would anyone else like to chime in on one? And it's perfectly fine if you would. All right, let me, what we're going to do too, for anyone listening to this webinar, we're going to summarize these points and we're going to share it. When we share the video from this, we're going to share it. We're going to share some key points as well, including all of these. But now, bear in mind, I've kept track in live time here. But Andy Korn spoke of intellectual honesty. We had Len, who spoke of first. He spoke of follow the funnel and the importance of warming an audience up, so to speak. We have Adam talking about competitive understanding and the real value that comes in that. Andrew Wagner spoke of measurability and understanding where every dollar is coming from. Andy Korn spoke of seasonality and this sort of and it goes hand in glove with the concept of recency, that there's a new seasonality, and I'm putting that in quotes because it doesn't necessarily follow the seasons, that media needs to be aware of today, especially in financial. And then Len just chimed in with, let's not forget the power of earned media. So those are the elements of success that this smart panel has come forward with. And let's get on with some questions, if that sounds like a good idea. I will remind our audience, if you like to ask a question, just please do on the Q&A toggle down below. And let's start with one of change. All right. And this is we could talk purely for hours on this particular subject. I'll point to you first, Adam, if I may, because you and I sort of spoke about it briefly in your introduction when you mentioned that you had been with Ptarmigan, focused on financial services media for all this time, for 9 years. Let's talk about change. What's changed? And let's use maybe that more or less time period of 10 years or so. What's changed in 10 years in media as it would relate to financial services? And I'll ask each panelist to use their own respective perspective as we go to you. So Adam, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things have changed. Number one, the media mix that we are generally running from 10 years ago to today is quite different, with a higher propensity to utilize more performance media channels. I would say when I first started, a large chunk of our investments was digital and print, let's say, right? Less so was search, social, and programmatic, to a lesser extent, right? But I've seen more of an openness to having a larger chunk of investment go towards those performance media channels than it was, nine or 10 years ago. Particularly programmatic has seen an increase in usage among our clients. I think that when I first started, there was a lot of risk averseness towards it, and I'm not saying that there isn't now, but I think that we've developed like tools and strategies to make folks feel comfortable. And throughout the years, we've designed audiences that we think are really spot on to our niche audiences that we're usually looking to reach.
Yeah.
I would say the data that we have access to, in order to more sophisticatedly reach a lot of these audiences across properties, has been another development over the past 10 years. First party audience data, there's been a lot of collection of that to reach, let's say, the financial advisor audience. And then lastly, I would say measurement. When I first started, measurement was quite basic, I would say. But we've gotten a lot more advanced in the tools, the data that we're able to measure, tying front end and back end data together. So I would say that those three big points, media mix, data, and measurement, have seen a tremendous evolution over the past 9 to 10 years.
Excellent. Adam, thank you for that. Let me ask you you mentioned about programmatic. I'm believing about 10 years ago or so, it was kind of high risk. And I say, whether it's real or not, it was perceived as sort of high risk. You don't know if your clients are going to want to do it. They're not sure where their ads are going to be seen, et cetera. What's changed about programmatic to make it more palatable and more practical in its use in your world?
So I don't know if programmatic has changed or people have just become more willing to try it, but I can tell you that, like, from our perspective, things that we do is we have like a very, very tight site list that we would be on, like 80 or so sites. Like I said, we've done a lot of work developing the appropriate audiences for these niche targets that we're going after. And we throw the kitchen sink when it comes to brand safety, layering on any potential brand safety filter that we can possibly find.
Yeah. Adam, thank you very much for your good little roster of what's changed. Now, I'll go to you, Andy Korn, if I may. Media mix, data, measurement. Those are some of the things that Adam suggested. What else has changed as it relates to media and content in our world?
So we are 90+% programmatic, and we do it with a great deal of precision. And some of that is the brand safety, but more than anything, it's in the targeting. Mm-hmm. So, having our own data sets has really been game-changing for us and our clients over the last year. And I'm going to pick 2 different audiences. One of them are pilots, people with a pilot's license. And almost all are accredited. They're extremely self-directed. No one can really tell them what to do, but we can present a lot of stuff to them. And then another is people in the C-suite. We look at it with firms from 1,000 to 2,000 employees. So we call it small business C-suite, which again, follow no one can tell them what to do. They're all mostly accredited, et cetera. So we want to find them where they are, and we want to make sure that we're not oversaturating. So we hate for someone to leave our landing page and then get chased around the internet by an ad programmatically. So we have a lot of guardrails in to make sure that we've got real limitations. And if they jump over to Facebook, that we're maintaining those limitations, which takes a lot of skill to do. So the other thing is we've added connected TV. CTV has been growing rapidly. It's a great way to get video content in. It allows even a tiny agency like ours to shoot a real 30-second commercial and or a 1-minute commercial. And it's been a lot of fun, and that can be controlled programmatically. So the media mix is expanding. So, data, the honing of programmatic, which I'd say has changed technologically a lot in the last 10 years. The letting go of legacy concepts of we must be in, if we're not in these 5 publications, we don't really exist. Great, we'll create a programmatic campaign in just at those 5. That's fine. Oh, and with our audience, maybe we want to put a couple of demographic overlays, even though it's our custom data. So this flexibility, but not letting it be infinite and making sure that you're controlling it and that it's not driving the bus, that has changed a lot as well. And then just clients' understanding of what we do and how we do it. We report 365 days a year. It's completely automated. I'm sure everyone has something similar. And I'm going to tip my hat to Andy Wagner, who actually helped us figure out what we should be reporting on and not reporting on. And I have worked with Blacklight MA when I was a chief marketing officer, where I was their client, and they did an incredible job. And I did learn quite a bit from them. So anyway, the reporting and then the impact of it and the reaction of clients to it, and them really beginning to understand and be more on board with what we're doing. So that's not technological, that's society catching up to technology, which is always a problem with new technology, which programmatic is. And I think that that's going to see change as well.
Andy, these are all terrific points, and I really appreciate your insight into each and every one of them. Let me go to you, Len, if I may, and I'm going to ask you the same question about what has changed. Take it away.
Yeah, perfect. Maybe what I'll do is just pick right up where Andy Korn left off and focus a little bit in on video. So the rise of video for B2B has been, I think, pretty astonishing and interesting to watch. And the number of senior executives and CEOs who are becoming comfortable shooting their own video and going direct to their audiences, that trend is, for better and for worse, is really exploding. And it does create these interesting opportunities to create brand moments around somewhat routine reporting requirements. So, case in point, we don't work directly with BlackRock, but I did watch with interest their most recent earnings call where they had, their executives actually broadcasting live, and they sort of successfully turned, routine earnings announcement into a branding moment. And I think the opportunities in video on LinkedIn for B2B are very compelling and can be potentially, very strategic, linking back to my earlier comments about creating a funnel for content. So that's been a really, I think, a really interesting way things have changed just in terms of how media is consumed and even, I suppose, how media is created.
Indeed, and it's such a great point. Again, originally mentioned by Andy Korn, and I had this question for him, so I'll bring it to you too, or I'll bring it to you now. What is it about video that makes it so I get why now it's targetable, right? And I understand that, but is there something that's just more compelling about it? I mean, in words that I can understand, what is it about video that makes it so effective?
Well, I think it's possibly 2 things. One is the personal connection that you have as an audience, engaging directly with someone who's holding the camera close to their face and talking to you. That's hard to replicate otherwise. And I think the other way that video can be really powerful, again, at maybe higher up in the funnel, more from a branding perspective, is sort of taking you, the audience, behind the scenes, seeing something you wouldn't otherwise, and getting an inside view. And I think executives who can master that format and deliver that effectively, I think that can be pretty powerful. So I think it's those 2 elements.
Are we going to see a lot more of it? A lot more of video in a personal, as you say, CEO directly to audience kind of way as we move forward?
I believe we will. And Matthew Boyle just wrote a story about this for Bloomberg, commenting on this trend. And I've seen some of the editorial team at LinkedIn also talking about this, the uptake of video with the C-suite. So yes, I think maybe we're at the beginning of that trend. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, Len, thanks so much for your input there. I'm gonna move on to you, Andy Wagner, with the same question about what's changed. It's hard to keep adding relevant things to this list that this smart panel has already given, so the pressure is turned up a notch for you. Before I have you answer, though, I'm going to say that I'm afraid this is going to be our last question. I warned you guys this is going to go quickly and we're going to have fun. But anyway, that all said, Andy, I'll hit this over to you right now. Talk about change with us. What's changed? You guys have been around for 20 years or so, I think. 25, right? Go ahead, talk to me.
So time, very hard to put a pin in time these days and really understand what was 10 years ago. What does that really mean 10 years ago? What was I doing 10 years ago? And thinking about what did the media mixes of the clients look like? So actually, when we were looking, I was looking back and what I was doing or who we were running, in 2014, and looking at what we were executing, and from a below the line direct response, bottom of the funnel execution perspective, consumer intent, even in 2024, was search and vertical search. And those were two key pinning elements for direct response financial services. From there, you had one of the most interesting things that have changed and gotten much more significant for us is not stepping more into programmatic and executing more programmatically because of audiences and first-party audience availability and the ability to upload first-party audiences and be able to engage them. What has been, if I was to put a one element on it, I would say that the publisher side of the equation, your Googles, your Bings, your Facebooks, have done a better job in building instrumentation for optimization, auto optimization. So, in 2014, we were executing for a client where we were auto optimizing based on a pixel being put on the thank you page of a lead form. And you were auto optimizing to a cost per lead. Now, you could also pick up like a customer ID at that moment and then get data back from the client on did that customer become did that lead become a customer or not. And that's where Andy Korn and I had spent some energy in the past. And and it always great to identify and execute against challenges that Andy Korn brings, because they're interesting and there's great clients behind them. For what we found, though, is now one of the most interesting things is you could actually, instead of having to marry that data on the back end, you could actually feed offline conversion data into some of these engines to be able to optimize instead of to a leading indicator, but to a lagging indicator. As long as the sample size is large enough of that lagging indicator, sometimes you'll go all the way to sale. Sometimes you'll go to add to cart, in a sense, let's say. In financial services, it would be, instead of a lead, it's an app. Instead of a fund, you go into the middle where there's a large enough sample at the app level versus the fund level. But in short, I would say that over the last 10 years, that instrumentation has gotten stronger, and our ability to execute media and auto optimize to a down funnel lagging indicator is a substantial evolution in terms of what is executable for direct to client financial services.
Yeah. Andy, thank you so much for that. Let me ask, I'm going to stick with you, Andy, for the very last question. You'll have to speak on behalf of all of our panelists. And I'm putting it in a fun way. Is there job security in what you guys do? Will there be a need for media consultancies in the next 20 years?
I won't be, it's not a self, it's not for us from a self perspective. The reality is 100% absolutely. And it's not about us, it's about talented people who have experience in the space. And there's an enormous amount of money saved, and there's an enormous amount of opportunity garnered when you're at the table strategically with the client and you're helping them drive their strategy into their execution, into their optimization. And that table needs talented people who are long in the game to help them really think through and have perspective on what is possible and have experience in what has happened. So all of us, for all the pain and suffering and elation that we've had over the last 30 years being in marketing, we bring that to the table. So there's always, it's always great to be able to have a resource that you can go to and say, have you been there and done that? Or, there's something new, give me your perspective on it because you've been there and done that, and you've driven all kinds of cars. Here's the electric car. You could still drive that car. Let's understand it.
Well, listen, Andy Wagner, that's going to have to be our last word for the day. I want to thank all of you panelists. This has been a lot of fun, really interesting. And as I say, this is going to be terrific for us to share with our greater audience around the world. Adam Klareich from Ptarmigan Media, Len Costa from RooneyPartners, Andy Korn from E5A IM, and Andy Wagner from Blacklight MA. You guys rock. Thank you all very much. Thank you, audience, for joining us. Look forward to the next time we all see each other, and thank you.